so our purpose was in working with leaders throughout the pandemic, the mounting, the accumulating challenges that they were facing and wanting so much to support their team members in, inspired us to say, okay, how else can we help? What else can we do here? And so we thought, well, let's start bringing people together on a monthly basis with a live open session. For like Matt, you're not as familiar as the rest of the crew on here in how we work. We are typically working with teams within an organization. And we don't often, every now and then, we might work with a group of leaders who work in various organizations. And so we really wanted to build these connections and bring all of you together. And our purpose for today is to cover really a lot of Q&A, cover your questions, your situations, so that you're getting some tools and you're walking out of here better equipped to reduce your stress and be more confident as you're supporting yourself and supporting those around you as you continue to walk forward in all these changes. So how we're going to walk through today is we'll spend a little bit of time sharing a couple fundamentals of the Wingspan system, Wingspan performance system. And that's familiar to most of you, so we're not going to spend a lot of time on that. And then we're going to go straight into your questions, your situations. We got a really good email from Matt, so we're going to be starting off with Matt after we give that foundation. As we're working together, let's say, so if we're covering Matt's situation that he wanted to talk about, Ivan might be sharing some tools and some support. If any of you have something additional to add, something that's working for you, something else you would encourage him to do, we want you to jump in. We want this to be interactive. That's another reason why we were not aiming for 50 people to be on this first monthly session.
Cool.
Okay.
All right. I'm going to share the screen here briefly, and we'll get the overview piece rolling. All right. So again, as a refresher for some of you, and as an entry point for others, when so many of us think about performance, so often in school and in jobs, we're really graded and evaluated on our technical performance. So what are we doing? What are the results that we come up with? If it's a task or a report, or we're selling something or creating a product or a process, that's usually what we're used to thinking about with performance. And what's important today, and frankly, in really every situation, is to begin to add to that and recognize that our behavioral component of that is just as important. And the higher we go in the organization, actually, our behaviors are far more important than what we technically know or are going to produce. So this is how we're working with others, and then how we're creating the results. And the other part about this is we're always creating relationships, either intentionally or unintentionally. We're continuing every day and every minute to teach others what's important to us and how we're working with them. So this is where we're doing things like we're communicating, we're showing ownership, we're exchanging feedback, holding ourselves or others accountable. So this is a different way to define comprehensive performance, and it's going to be critical as we go through the rest of today. So this is our overview slide, and we're going to start briefly at the top. We'll talk a little bit more about this piece on the third page. This is our overview diagram, which gets into the three zones that we're going to talk about a lot. So then the middle is the performance zone. And when any of us we're feeling like, oh, we're in the sweet spot, that's a different way of saying we're in the performance zone. And usually the sweet spot, or I'm always on fire with this thing, that's usually where we're higher in intensity. So you can see on the left side, we've got our physical, mental, and emotional levels of energy or activity. That's going to drive where we are in each of these zones. The important part is how we show up for different tasks is we're going to have a different performance zone. So I just got a motorcycle a week ago. So I'm getting back into motorcycling. So for me, my performance zone, where I used to ride 20 years ago, my performance zone was really big. Well, now over time, those skills have atrophied, so it's shrunk. Well, my autopilot is gone. Like, it's non-existent. Like, it is not an option for me to not pay attention because I'm still a little freaked out. And my stress zone is pretty big. And with time, it's even just a week of riding, my performance zone is getting bigger and my stress zone is shrinking just a little bit. So what's cool for us to recognize is that different situations, different activities, we're going to have different zones on different days even. And this is going to show up both in what we're creating with other people and also how we're creating those relationships. So if you look at the bottom part of the slide, we've got two fundamental core components of the Wingspan performance system on the left side, which is activating language and advancing questions. These are the ways that we're really speaking to ourselves, speaking with others, and then asking questions of ourselves and others. And on the right side, we've got a list of the forms of support. So I'm not going to go too much into that. Just know that all of these tools we can use both with ourselves and with others. Oftentimes people will start to think, oh, I can use this with this person or with that person or my brother or my partner or my associate at work. We can also use all these with ourselves. I'll remind people that, and it seems obvious, we're with ourselves 100% of the time. So practicing these with ourselves is actually a great way to start and for us to really key in on what's my contribution, what am I doing? Because that daily practice is where we're going to create the best results for ourselves and for others. So now when we take that top part of the diagram, we're going to lay it on its side, and you think about the autopilot zone, performance zone, and stress zone. So now the performance is, you can see it's pretty flat. And what's important to recognize too is that the autopilot zone, you may be achieving a decent technical output. So again, if I think about motorcycling, 20 years ago, I could ride a motorcycle long distance with almost no real thought because I was really skilled at it. I'd achieved a level of mastery with certain aspects where it didn't require any real active thought. Sometimes I would get myself in a little trouble because I wasn't paying attention to the situation. So I'd go from one situation where doing something worked well to a different situation where that thing didn't work well, and I would get in trouble because I wasn't paying attention. So if you look at the bottom part of those bullets, you'll see that we're in a hypo-aware state. We're not really keying into what's going on in front of us. And our level of intensity is at an unproductive level. So we're not really aware, we're not thinking, we're not creating. So yeah, jump in.
And yeah, I want to add something to that. So because we work with so many experienced leaders and high performers, when we get, any of us as humans, when we get so good at doing something that we're not thinking about it, we actually put ourselves down into autopilot. So a lot of times when, if you're first looking at this and you're thinking, well, I'm not in autopilot very much, that's a big part of the work that we do, is we help leaders, we help individuals to begin to recognize when they're in each of these three zones. And people are always surprised at how much they really are in autopilot, even though they would think that they're not. So I want to make sure that you're looking at autopilot, even though you're seeing hypo-aware, you're seeing that this can be an unproductive performance state, or you're thinking, you're seeing the word apathy. Keep in mind that a lot of times you're going to get yourself there through mastery, not because you're apathetic.
Yeah, good point. Good point. And when we shift to the middle zone, the performance zone, and this is where most of us like to think that we are today. Most of us strive to be. And when I first started working with Kathy, I thought, oh, I want to be at a 9.9, right on that upper level of intensity. And she helped me recognize that, well, that's actually a really draining place to be. The output's incredible. It's like giving rocket fuel though to something. It doesn't work all day. So during the day, you probably recognize you've got events or times or different activities or tasks where you are productive, or perhaps even more productive, depending on what's going on. And this is where you're creating, you're generating, you're being resourceful, you're coming up with new ideas, you're solving problems. And so again, there's a range of intensity in this. And the part of the brain we're using here is our prefrontal cortex. And this is where our executive function or decision-making resides with us. So some of the adjectives that go into this part are aware, mindful, intentional, deliberate, and those are going to show up in multiple spots. So on the right side, this is where our intensity gets to the point where you can see our performance falls off the cliff. I know for myself, if I go to the stress zone, that tends to come out in me either shutting down or me yelling at somebody. And I've got a counterproductive level of intensity now. So my tension is at the point where my ability to really thoughtfully, deliberately, and intentionally work through the situation is gone. Now I'm working from the part of my brain, the amygdala, that kept me alive, or kept my ancestors alive 100,000 years ago, which is the fight, flight, or freeze part of our brain. That works great, so my ass doesn't get eaten by a saber-toothed tiger. It doesn't work so well when I'm attempting to have complex negotiations or solve a difficult problem or work through a tough situation with other people. That's not where I want fight, flight, or freeze to come out, because I tend to not have really good ways of working with others. And what happens here, sometimes we become hyper aware. We focus on something so much that we're not seeing the rest of the situation. So that's some really quick spacing on each one of those three zones. What would you add to that, if anything, really briefly?
If you go back a slide. The only thing I want to add is that, like Ivan said earlier, where each of us as a human being, where we are physically, mentally, and emotionally in every moment drives our performance. So it drives how we're seeing things, how we're thinking about things, how we're feeling, and then of course, how we're communicating. And so keep in mind, if you are up in the stress zone, for example, if your physical, mental, and emotional energy is so high, you're up in the stress zone, then that's the place from which you're communicating. It's the place from which you're thinking, behaving, interacting with others,
Perceiving, filtering,
perceiving situations, even perceiving other people's behaviors. And so that comes out, of course, into the results and the relationships, whether that be in the workplace or personally on the home front. And so another way to keep this in mind is, let's say you are down in autopilot, and you will learn, you'll be surprised to learn how much of the time you are in autopilot. If you're down in autopilot and you're speaking from autopilot, then chances are high that the people are listening in autopilot. Mm-hmm. And so that's where we're helping, we help leaders learn how to interrupt their own. So that practice with self, learn how to interrupt their own autopilot. So they're coming up into the performance zone. And when you're interacting with others, when you're interacting with, whether it be a team member or a spouse or one of your children, when you come up into the performance zone, now you are far more likely to get stronger performance or healthier performance. And of course, we're talking about behaviors, communication, decision-making. You're far more likely to get that stronger, healthier performance from the people around you.
And part of that's because so often people are in autopilot that when we're used to hearing people in autopilot, it becomes this Charlie Brown teacher, want, load your own, and we start to tune that out. So when someone says something different, and I know I've been lucky enough to work with people who, when they spoke, pretty much the whole room stopped and was like, I'm really listening to what this guy has to say. I'm really keying into what's going to come out of her mouth next, because that person speaks so differently and speaks in such a unique way that everyone recognizes that that person is high in the performance zone. Whether they thought of it that way or not, that's really where they were. And so as a result, it was more interesting, more compelling, they were far more influential in how they interacted with others.
So that is a quick and dirty overview that we
stop share.
Yep, stop sharing that we wanted to give you. We'll also follow up. We'll follow up with a quick PDF. We'll send that out to all of you so that you have it. You can refer to it and use it. We really wanted to, like I said earlier, we really want to jump into your questions, your situations, and so that we're giving you the most relevant real-time support as possible. And you can do that in a number of ways. If you want to write it in the chat box, if you want to raise your hand, If you want to simply unmute yourself and talk, all of you have the ability to do that. So what are some of the questions or situations you had in mind when you registered to join us today?
I'll jump in. It was just more to experience other people, thoughts and feelings of their sessions outside of my tight group, my little squad. I think it's been a fascinating journey getting closer with different people from different departments, and then encouraging to sort of lower that boundary and communicate thoughts and feelings and help each other through certain things. I thought was truly valuable compared to other training I've done. So I'm really more of a fly on the wall. I'm really interested to meet other people and see what their thoughts and feelings are of their experiences.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And Chris, if you can also take some time and think about what specific areas would you like, for example, just so that you know, Heather, Tina, Matt, Natalie, Claudia, they all have worked with us more in depth. And so they're gonna have a good gauge on the tools that you're currently practicing. So you might have a specific question about, hey, how are you exercising this, or where are you getting those results? So yeah, come up, take some time, and if you want to speak up again in a little bit or right now with a specific question or focus, give a holler.
Thank you.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, I think I'm actually in a pretty similar place and just kind of exploring a little bit. I think when I saw the LinkedIn posting for this, one of the things that struck me is we're coming up on what I'm calling internally right now the great reshuffle. There's a lot of pressure in our market in financial services in particular, and so there's a lot of movement of bodies right now in our business. We're a people business, and trying to understand, what people are going through, and really trying hard to figure out a way to stay connected and keep everybody motivated, moving in the right direction when we're still in a remote work environment, which has been, I think, challenging for a lot of people, some more so than others. And I think that was my primary motivation, or my primary question that I had coming in this, is to be able to help better understand perspectives and tools to keep people engaged and keep them connected to the practice and the clients when we can't be together like we have been in the past.
Yeah, a couple of things stand out right away, Matt, on what you're saying. And so a lot of managers are asking us, how do I stay connected with my team, or how do I help to keep them motivated? And one of the most important things that we're encouraging them to do is, first of all, remember that when some of your team members are coming to you with a challenge, or they're expressing some concern or stress, a lot of times we'll think that they're coming to us so that we do something. And what I encourage you to think instead is that they're coming to you to be something. And so instead of thinking that you've got to have the answers or the tools to, quote unquote, keep them motivated, it's far more impactful and healthy for you to be caring, or show that you want to support them, show that their well-being is important. And one of the most important tools is what we call those advancing questions. So for example, instead of you figuring out, okay, how do I keep the team connected? A better way for you to go about that is to say, how would you like to be connected? Mm-hmm. Or how are you staying connected in a way that's working while we're working from home? When you're asking your team members those questions, now you get exactly what you're wanting here in this platform, and Chris is wanting, If you're asking your team members those questions, you're getting the magic of the collective answers. And so another example that I would give you is if any of you have team members who are coming to you and they are on the verge of burnout, or they're feeling stressed, in two things on that. Instead of thinking like, how do I keep them motivated? There are some core first steps in terms of self-care. Rather than how do I keep them motivated, keep in mind that some first steps, if they're up in the stress zone, first steps are actually just simply coming down into a better feeling place of perhaps being more centered or exercising more control, rather than expecting them to feel motivated. So that's another thing to keep in mind, is that if you are, and here's where you can also use advancing questions again. So if you're saying, how are you being sure to care for yourself? How are you shutting things down at a decent hour at the end of the workday so that you're spending time with your family? Asking those questions is showing your team members that you do care, and you're helping them determine some things that would work for them, rather than you telling them things that could work for them.
And that connects with that first example too, because if you can ask a question like, well, what helps you relax, or how do you unwind, or what helps you come down from some of that higher intensity, that can be a way for them to tap into that and go, oh yeah, I feel better when I do this. Okay, cool. What do you see as options for you to incorporate that in some ways into the day? Or it can help other people. And one of the most important things you're doing is, and this is one of the things that I like that Kathy's saying, is it's not just giving them the answer, it's helping them find their own answers. They know sometimes, and I've done this, I see this and then I see this, and for whatever reason I see them as separate and really not connected. And then someone asks a question, or I'll recognize something else, and it's like, oh wow, these things actually snap together really well. So I can take this to help myself. And that's one of the most powerful parts there.
Yeah, so it's really asking a lot more questions of your team members, even though they may have come to you with a question, helping them to co-create the solution together with you. How about for the rest of you, when you heard what Matt described, who would want to add to that, something that is working for you with your team?
Hi, I'll add in. Hey, Tina. So in a previous life, I had the opportunity to be part of some of the Wingspan training with my former team. But one of the things that I took away from that, and I've been able to build into my current role, are the advancing questions. It's not so much like Matt has with the with the checking in, the self-care, whatnot. I'm in a production facility, so I'm in manufacturing, so it's the land of the forever disengaged employee, and asking some of those advancing questions, because I've found that they do come wanting an answer. I have a problem with this, so asking those advancing questions has helped me to keep them connected as being part of the solution, versus just dropping the baby on my doorstep and wanting me to solve the world peace. So so that's been very helpful. And so when I saw this pop up on LinkedIn, I'm hopeful to be able to dive a little deeper and expand on what I have been able to glean from those few sessions that I was with you all.
Cool.
Yeah, that's a fantastic addition. And Matt, so that when we're talking about advancing questions, and we can send more information afterwards. Here's a good solid premise is one, we call them advancing questions because they advance the relationship as well as what you're producing in that exchange, whether it be a decision or you're co-creating a solution.
Learning about what's going on, what they've already done.
Yeah. And so what Susan is highlighting here as well is that they may come, you might have team members that are coming with a question. And if we're in the habit of letting them drop the baby on the doorstep, if we're in the habit of letting them do that, then that's how we will habitually add one to our own stress, because now we're just taking on
I feel like it's ours.
Yeah, like it's ours, additional responsibilities. And again, it goes back to when Susan, I'm sure you've got lots of examples where when you begin asking the advancing questions, you're turning that exchange into a development moment itself. You're prompting that person to think about things. Oftentimes, you're also encouraging and acknowledging that they have the resources or the experience or knowledge to actually answer their own question. Sometimes they just don't have the confidence to do it. And another thing about the advancing questions, and an easy way to think about them is if you start 90% of your questions with who, what, how, when, where, you will automatically strengthen the quality of what you produce in that exchange, and you'll dramatically strengthen the relationship. And it gets us out of the habit of asking very poor yes or no questions.
Yeah. I was on a team session yesterday with one of the teams I'm on for my own development, and probably 95% of the questions were yes, no questions. And the answers simply weren't as good. And to this other part about advancing questions and how to use them is one way to help team members, Matt, dial in a little bit more specifically, is sometimes people will say, oh my gosh, I'm overwhelmed, or I've got all this. And I've felt this way myself sometimes. And one of the questions I'll ask myself, and I know Chris has heard this in the sessions I have with his team, is the question of, well, what parts specifically are really difficult? Because sometimes it's easy to turn the whole thing into a giant mess sandwich. We're like, oh my God, it's all crap and it's all craziness, when really that's not the case. It's like, I got these two things that are a real bear, and I got these other things that are, they're about normal. And so it helps us refocus and go, oh yeah, well, my two spots are actually with this. This is where I'm really having the hangups or the tough time. So now we can have a more productive conversation. The leader isn't making assumptions about, oh, well, let me jump in and help you with this. And it's just going to allow for a much better and a much more thorough assessment from both parties on what's truly going on. And I see Tina's got her hand up.
Yeah. Tina, jump in.
So I was just going to say, Kathy and I had this conversation earlier in the week. So my team had owed me something, and we had a meeting. It was a pretty quick turnaround. They're all very busy. Half of them had done what they owed me, half of them had not. I was empathetic to their plight and forgave them pretty quickly, and then offered to just do it. And the minute I hung up the phone, I thought, I'm gonna have to confess this to Kathy, and she is definitely not gonna like it. So, so I did that. And she reminded me, as she has before, empathy is, certainly not a bad reaction in general to have, but when you allow that empathy to impact your behavior to the extent that you're taking a load off your employees, what you're basically telling them is, I don't trust that you can handle it. I don't believe that you, empathy is another way of sometimes looking at someone and making a judgment about what they're capable of that is likely inaccurate. So I went back to the group and I just confessed that specifically, which was really powerful, I think. I just said, hey, I kind of let you off the hook, that's not really who we want to be as a team, right? I don't want you to let me off the hook if I drop a commitment. And so I'm gonna do you the favor of not letting you off the hook. And I think the team gets much stronger when you have those kinds of open conversations about what you're working on, and also when you assume they're capable and don't let empathy minimize their abilities in your mind.
Yeah, I love that addition, Tina, because it's that combination of, hey, I understand if you encountered some challenges. At the same time, you're still expected to hold yourself accountable, and I'm going to support you by holding you accountable also. Sometimes we think if we've got team members who are stressed or who are having challenges, sometimes we think that doing it for them or letting them off the hook is a way to support them. And actually, that is highly counterproductive, and it's not healthy, because we will, like Tina's pointing out, we'll send all these other messages to them, like, I don't trust you, you're not capable.
I'll step in and do all your work from now on. So if you don't feel like doing it, you just come lay it on my door and I'll take your ugly baby and put it to bed.
Yeah. Susan, what do you have? You have your hand up.
One of the things that I have also found that's been beneficial is when asking the questions and having my employees be a part of the solution, is it brings into perspective, is it really something they're invested in? Is it really a problem? So it helps determine, are they just, what the true root cause is. And sometimes it's highly successful, and other times they pick up their ugly baby and go. And but that's been very successful as they come in from a production environment where it's very manual, very, very long days, hard work, engaging them. They make the decision as to exactly how important it is.
Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah, that's a perfect addition, because there's a couple things that Susan, you are creating that you might not even be aware of. So for any of you, if you've got a team member you've got team members who might be coming to you out of stress and out of habit. And so they might be in the habit of coming to you out of stress, wanting you to give them the answer or tell them what to do. And when you stop and ask those advancing questions, then, like Susan said, first of all, you're holding them responsible for communicating and coming to you in a far more productive way. And
let me jump in real fast, because the unproductive way is, hi boss, I got a piece of paper and I'm ready to write down whatever you tell me to do with this. Yeah, that's not them showing up with any intentionality, any prep, any thought. So I wanted to bring in that, because that's, in my mind, that's like the visual cue is, hi, I got pen and paper. I'm ready to write down exactly what the steps are.
Yeah. Well, and if they're in the habit of coming to you out of stress, then the other thing that Susan is creating when she stops and asks an advancing question, then she's literally prompting them to process and think about it differently. So she's actually helping them take themselves out of stress down into the performance zone. So she's helping them to, one, stop and think, sometimes helping them to stop and think differently about something. Or like Ivan talked about, we can ask questions that help a person to break it down. If you've got someone who's up in stress and they're coming to you for some support, when you ask questions that help them to break it down into chunks, you're helping them neurologically and physiologically come down into the performance zone.
So let's actually jump into some examples of that, because again, if someone shows up and they say, hey, I've got a blank piece of paper, And as Chris has heard me say many times, the first question out of the leader's mouth is, well, awesome, what do you see? What are your plans? What are your ideas or concepts around how to solve this problem? And if the person really has looked at it and they're like, God, I just don't know. I don't know. Okay, well, let's back up a step from the technical parts of the answer. Let's look at what's important. What are we going for big picture? What are the parameters that we're working with? What things of this do we have flexibility with, and where do we not have flexibility? And now what you're doing is, instead of just saying, well, here, let me just give you the answer. Now what you're helping them do is how you're helping them with changing how they even think about or approach this problem in the first place. So instead of just diving into technical answers, they're saying, oh, well, these are the important parameters, or this is where we've got the flexibility, or this is the real resources or the real outcome that we're going for. And it can help them begin to at least approach it differently. So now you're helping them step through their own problem solving process. And afterwards, again, it can be a great thing to remind them is, hey, the way we stepped through this was awesome. And now you've got this, so you can use this with yourself before you come and we have a conversation next time, so that I'm going to ask you some of the same questions. And now you already know, hey, this is a rubric. This is how we're going to start this conversation.
Yeah. And if you want to grab that one, the other thing too, that we want to make sure, especially for those of you where the advancing questions are a little new, if you're in the habit of asking a bunch of yes or no questions, did you do this? Have you thought of that? Did you do this? Did you talk to so-and-so? Those are far less effective, because you are unknowingly or unintentionally doing the thinking for them. You're just simply walking them through your own problem solving. You're also it can be really condescending when you ask a whole host of yes or no questions.
Or frustrating for the other person.
It's really frustrating.
Yeah.
Exactly. So
did you do this? Yes. Did you do that? Yes. Did you do this? Like, oh my God, you paid me to do this. I know how to do these things.
Yeah.
Yes. Stop asking me all the rookie questions.
Yeah. Rookie questions is good. So that's where if you write down and if you simply start, and Matt, you could ask any one of the other people here, if you simply start 95% of your questions with who, what, how, when, where, not why, who, what, how, when, where, you will automatically support them in more effective ways and help them in healthier ways to come down into the performance zone.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, jump in, Natalie.
Is there a button that you press to raise your hand? I saw that you said a few people raised their hand. Is there a button for that? I'm not finding it.
Yeah, it's on the bottom.
Down at the bottom, there's a little icon and it says raise hand.
Looks like that.
I don't have it. But that wasn't my question. And I'll figure that out.
I love the old fashioned way. Just raise your hand.
Manual.
I'm bringing it back a little bit to what you presented. You showed on there the autopilot, and when you speak in autopilot, people start listening in autopilot, which really caught my attention. So I've probably been speaking in autopilot more than I should be or would like to be. What are some good starting points or examples of where I can be more cognizant of not coming from autopilot mode?
Fantastic question.
Yeah,
and
really good.
I'll start to answer. And Chris, Heather, Tina, Susan, I'm also looking at any of you to jump in and share your answers because you're very practiced in that area. So one place to start, Natalie, and actually we could probably include this in the follow-up PDF. One place that we help leaders to begin taking themselves out of autopilot and up into the performance zone is we have a list of illegal words, and we call them illegal words and phrases. A lot of nearly anyone that we've ever worked with for over 18 years, they're in the habit of some of this language, this autopilot language that can promote confusion It can perpetuate a victim mindset. It dilutes the clarity and the impact of what you're saying.
Or doesn't provide the clarity and impact
Yeah.
of what you're saying. That's the other part of it is it's, well, we need to do this. How come? Well, we shouldn't do this. Well, maybe we shouldn't.
So here, yeah, so some phrases or words to start eliminating so that you're coming up out of autopilot. The phrase, I think. I'm putting this as number one, particularly now when so many people, so many of us do have people that are stressed, they're tackling challenges, whether it be family members or whether it be colleagues or team members. They're coming to you because they want clarity. They're coming to you because they want they want your confidence, and they want direction
And guidance. Yeah.
and guidance. And so if you're in the habit of saying, and a lot of people are, if you're in the habit of saying, I think, blah, 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 I think that this would be a good idea. I think that all of a sudden you unknowingly introduce some resistance or hesitation. You're not coming through with that clarity and confidence that they're actually looking for.
Mhm.
So that's a phrase to remove. And we have a whole list of we have a whole list of words. And again, we can send out a couple of these afterwards. Chris and Heather, how about you guys? Or Susan?
I'll chime in. I think.
Oh, you're playing with us.
I know
There you
by
go.
imagining if I'm on a battlefield and my commander goes, I think we should shoot them first. Maybe I have a feeling we should. Then that's like a big me no, don't want to listen to you. I want to go over there, right? So
Yeah.
I'm thinking that because I'm thinking of my military stuff right now, but that's why I think some of that language can come in. And then equally, I look at my 6-year-old and a 7-year-old, right? Moment of hesitation is weakness and indecision. You have to be excited. You have to be assertive. This thing's awesome. It's huge. It's going to be incredible. You have to go right now. Brush teeth. Let's go. You're like, I think we should brush teeth before we do this. We may run out of time. Dude, we're going to run out of time. What can I do to help you?
Yeah.
But like sometimes it's thinking I've got a little 6-year-old in the back of the audience and then leading them into battle as well. That's the two pictures I put in my mind. So imagine, Matthew, with you and your troop trying to get them into cars and various things. It's like if you're a little bit vague, then those guys are just not going to move.
What a great example. Thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
I will chime in and say that my most valuable tool has been tell me more, or what more can you tell me about the situation or the whatever, because it stops autopilot mode, not only for me, but for the person on the other end. I noticed right away that when we shifted into COVID, and I work at a university, I'm in career services, I have a rock solid team, but the team that I'm on as far as leadership goes, we were all fairly new, and then we got shoved into COVID. Everybody went automatically into the stress zone, and then we seemed to not find the performance zone and moved back into the autopilot zone, and everything became transactional. And the tell me more, which is a kind of a what question or a how, it just depends, has really opened things up. And I'm noticing now that people are, when they do come to me, which happens still, I would say actually happens a little bit more, but it's a discussion. It's not a question and answer period. And I've really valued that. And I would say the other thing that I've done to really pull us out of that transaction period, this may sound a little silly, but it has worked. We have had intentional sessions where we get to know each other. I also got to onboard a new person in September to build our team. And so every time we meet, which is bi-weekly, I don't have to meet with them every week. They're just rock stars and I don't need to do that. But we have a question where we get to know each other. So this last week, the question was, if you could take a lesson from anybody, who would that be? It could be alive or passed away. What would that topic be, and who would you take it from? And I'd like to know a little bit more about what's behind that, right? Incredible. I've learned so much. And then the other one that was really impactful is, I think a lot of times we try to put our emotions, I just said, I think we try to put our emotions aside because we say to ourselves, I have a job to do. I'm expected to present to others in this way, yet I'm an emotional being, right? And so I asked my team, including my student worker, I want you to share 3 photographs with the team. And I'd like you to tell me more about each photograph. Every single one of us cried. And from then on, we have been so tight. It breaks autopilot.
Yeah.
It teaches
awesome.
others that, first of all, I'm often seen as somebody who's like, by the book and, so on and so forth. I'm actually really not that way. But my team saw that, you could come to me with the tender, the painful, I'm going to listen to you. And it's really broken the transactional. And the performance zone is there most of the time for us. It's pretty incredible.
That is awesome.
That's
Yeah.
Thank you.
Such
I'd like to-
powerful
I'm sorry.
examples. Oh yeah.
So I was going to kind of piggyback off of Heather just a little bit. I'm a human resources manager, so I have to operate within some guidelines and some boundaries, and try to to be very inconsistent and whatnot. But I am a human, and and it's sometimes it's tough, but I absolutely love the kind of, your question was kind of like along the lines of, if you could have dinner with anybody, past or present, who would it be, and why, to kind of to spark some of those conversations. And so we've had a shift in our operational leadership. So I have a new director of operations to whom I report, and I try to be very intentional, very thoughtful with my words, and to not say "I think" and the ums. So the so's are still there, but no ums. But I want to come across as confident but not cocky, helpful, and show up as a leader and lead by example. And so some of these things, like Heather had said, I'm going to incorporate some of those into building the relationship with my leaders, but on a little bit of a different level with my employees. I have a decent size of non-English speaking employees, so I'm learning Spanish.
Fantastic.
So far, I can tell them my shoes are blue. I want beer and tacos, but we're getting there. But I make the effort, and
Sure.
it shows.
Yeah.
Well, and that's awesome, because Susan, when you started describing that, you hit the nail right on the head for the word I had written down, which to answer Natalie's question is, how do we not speak in autopilot? It's to be intentional. It's to be deliberate. So when we really know, well, what is it I want to do? What is it I want to say? How do I want to help influence this person? Now you're being deliberate. Now I know, I want them to feel this way. I want to convey this critical information. I want to be sure that I show that there's space for them to lean in, to share their opinion. And when we start with, what am I really, really wanting to do? We're by definition not going to be in autopilot, because autopilot is, something happens and I just have this response, and I'm not thinking, I'm not assessing, I'm not really looking at what it is that I'm wanting to create.
I'm so sorry, Kathy. I've also practiced with reiterating what I'm hearing to make sure, A, that I'm understanding, and B, that they are conveying the message that they want me to hear.
Yeah, that is so good, because again, you're showing them. So like all of this links to, Natalie, what you were saying about, okay, where do I start? How do I make sure I'm not in autopilot? And it also links to Matt's question earlier about wanting to stay connected, wanting to keep them motivated, show the team that you're supporting them. So notice that what Chris what Chris was bringing up in his practice is, as soon as you start to practice removing specific words, you automatically move yourself from autopilot up into the performance zone, because now you are literally thinking about the words you're using.
Yeah.
And then I love Chris's example where he's also practicing with his kids, and he's seeing how it prompts specific behavior and how autopilot prompts a lack of behavior. And then what Heather was bringing to the table too, she's asking her team members, and this is a key one for you, Matt, she's asking her team members questions that I'll bet you nobody else is asking them. And so automatically you are more, you're building a stronger connection. And then Susan, what you're talking about too, the even more benefit, because you also want to demonstrate your personal leadership and your competence and your confidence to the people around you, including your manager or other business leaders that you work with.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I like the way you tied that up, and particularly the piece where I keep coming back to, and I was joking about we need to, is it's not just removing the words, it's also replacing them with what it is that you're wanting to do. So oftentimes, and Chris knows this from being on one of my teams, is it's not just chopping or restricting our vocabulary. It's really about, well, what is it that I'm going for? Well, if I want to influence somebody, if I want to paint a better picture of how I came to a decision, or what I see as a good approach, saying, well, we need to do X, or we should do X. Well, I'm taking all of my understanding of that process, I'm taking all of my evaluation and my criteria, and I'm shrinking it down to just a few little letters that really do a crappy job of explaining how I came to that conclusion. So instead saying, well, we're going for this, and this brings these characteristics, and therefore that seems to be the best. While also at the same time creating space, if I want to, for someone to say, well, Heather, Natalie, what do you guys see? Like, how are you viewing this differently? So I can both be highly confident in what I'm saying and presenting, while also equally providing space for others to jump in and say, well, it seems like you're missing this piece, or, hey, you're seeing this differently than I am. Let's go back to that, because now we can have a better conversation around what the framework is or what the criteria are for success, because we may have perceived those differently or understood them to be different things at the beginning.
Yeah, really good. And so going back to our purpose, we're coming to the end here of our time together today. Going back to our purpose, we want to make sure that we are exchanging. We're bringing this community together. We're exchanging this support. You're not just learning from us, we're learning from each other. And we want to make sure that you're getting the tools that are helpful for the challenges you have in front of you, or your goals and opportunities in front of you right now. And so it's helpful for us to know what did you really value about today? What do you want us to include or cover in upcoming sessions? We'd love to hear from you. So let's start with the first one. What did you most value from today's exchange?
Validation for me. I'm not alone. There are others who are still in the same boat, and it's a never-ending process. So it was extremely helpful for me to hear the questions that Matt had, how Chris gets his, his soon-to-be 7-year-old to brush his teeth, and Natalie's question and Heather's approach. So food for thought and some new tools for my box.
Cool.
Fantastic.
I think equally just reinforcing that who, how, why, what right at the beginning of each question. That just hammers it home again.
That is another way too, Natalie. So if you just practice starting out who, what, how, when, where in front of 95% of your questions, you'll automatically be taking yourself out of autopilot. You're automatically going to produce something far more valuable. Whether you're asking yourself those questions, or you're asking others those questions.
Right. And I think in a previous session, I think you said to avoid why, right? Why is one that so I have been working on that. So I have not been in autopilot this whole time. So
Sure. Yeah,
Good to
and some really quick background on that for everyone on the call who isn't familiar with this. Why, particularly for things that have already happened, like my favorite question from my mom when I was a kid, well, why did you do that? Well, I don't know, because I'm stupid. So there wasn't a good reason for it, and I felt like I was on the spot, and it was easy to get defensive. So instead, if you think about why questions are being for something in the future, well, why is that going to help us? That's where it can be good, because it's an expansive set of options for the why. When we look in the rearview mirror, though, in the past, and we ask them, well, why did we do that question? It's easy for somebody to become defensive, and we can ask a different question to get very similar, although far more effective information, like, well, what were you assessing, or what did you understand the situation to be, or what did you want to create when you did that? Now you're getting to a lot of the same information you would get with a why question. It's just not, why did you do that? And people are less likely to be defensive.
Matt, how about you?
I think the concept of the advancing questions and just the whole concept of autopilot performance and stress, I think that was that really, spoke to the way I think I'm wired a little bit. And so that was helpful just to see that kind of framework put out there. I think probably more so than anything, though, it's just, again, like what others have said, is just getting together and hearing that, we are not alone in this, having some of these issues, and hearing some of the solutions that people have used in the past. I thought, Heather, your comments about how you're interacting with team members in that way was pretty powerful, and it's got my brain moving in a lot of different directions at the moment. So yeah, I don't know that I can really, if I say one or two more things, I probably covered the whole call. So it's not really that helpful, is it?
It is, though. It is. So yeah, thank you so much for that. Chris, how about you?
I mean, there's just a lot of validation and hearing other people have similar issues. It's just funny because you sort of trapped it within your little bubble. So it's interesting to hear other people.
Awesome. Really good. Well, we're going to send out a follow-up, because Matt, also, like what you were saying, the stress zone, performance on autopilot, just that helps you to look at things different, helps you to look at human behavior different. It's also a framework you can share with your team members. It's helpful when you're using very common terms to even gauge and share with each other where you're at. So we'll send out a quick follow-up. And we'll also send out a couple of questions so we can hear directly from you what you want on future sessions. We're also building courses. So we're going to use your input to prioritize what courses we're building. And this has been really fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, one thing I'd want to add, I thought was really good, was Kiwani, we got a book, like a journal. So what's nice is, like, if you see me like off, is like I'm just noting so many things down. And there you go, Heather. So I find like that tremendous, because then I can flick through things as well as like track situations that you come arise for then your progress forms. So I think that's really, really good to have that like dedicated book.
Yeah, for sure. I'm just so glad you added that.
Yeah, it's a great way to keep all those thoughts and experiences together in one tight place.
Yeah.
Awesome. It's a reminder every time you pull out your bag, like who, what, why, right? Like did I do this today?
Who, what, how, when, where.
A lot of leaders keep the Wingspan practice. They call it the Bible. They keep it on their desk. So, all right, everyone, have a fantastic weekend, and we look forward to next time.
Yeah, and to the last fourth Friday of the month next month.
Fourth Friday of the month. Very good.
Cool.
All right.
Take care, guys.